on the ground to protect people. That is the only way it can be done. Bombing will not affect that.
NATO insists the low-flying Apaches are simply a logical extension of the air operation, but that their greater precision and all-weather capability during the day or night will enable the Allies to do a more effective job of neutralizing the Serbian forces on the ground. Alex Crawford, Sky News.
In fact, they were in action yesterday as well in Iraq. So they've been not the same aircraft. They've been very successful in their operations, and I think that the reason that the Tornado is able to do more than the Harrier, of course, is it does carry more of a weapon load, and it does have. We're about to get them in service. This version, the D version, the big donut on top is a multi-metric radar. That's the older version, but it's still capable of firing a missile over 8 kilometers. There's the gun, 30mm gun, capable of 2.5 kilometer range, ripping open lightly armored vehicles like the sort that the Serb militia are using. It's very agile, low down, easy to get out of trouble, and it's armored.
Reportedly hitting petroleum production facilities, ammunition stores and air defenses. NATO says with the break in the weather, it's also ready to go after Serb forces in Kosovo. In Brussels Monday, NATO leaders are to meet to formally approve Washington's offer of added firepower, which includes 24 Apache gunships. But logistical complications may mean it will be days before the low-flying attack helicopters are actually dispatched. Well, meanwhile, nations are stepping up their efforts to feed and shelter the hundreds.
Another night of NATO airstrikes against Yugoslavia. Niš, one of the country's largest cities, under attack. According to official news agencies, an army command took a direct hit, but no casualties were reported, as most of NATO's likely targets are emptied of their personnel. A plan, sources say, to minimize casualties. The morning after, flames consumed the last floors of this building, caught in the crossfire, according to Serbian television, which reported a tobacco warehouse, the university, a kindergarten, and several other civilian buildings, including this store, were also damaged. Belgrade was targeted too. Serbian television says NATO struck at the command of the Yugoslav Air Defense Forces, burning the building to the ground. Here, too, authorities say the collateral damage was extensive to the water system, to a music school, and to the Faculty of Agriculture.
They are hitting civilian targets because they want to scare the people. They do not understand that after every strike, our people become stronger and more resolute to defend our country.
Across town, Serbian television reports more strikes, more fire, and more destruction, too close to a hospital.
We heard 2 strong explosions. I don't understand why, because there are no military targets around here. The patients are doing well, but they are shocked.
In central Serbia, meanwhile, television reports 3 NATO missiles hit this bridge, leaving the town of Raška with only 1 standing. People here in
by 12 leading aid agencies, including the Red Cross, Oxfam and Christian Aid. Once collected, though, there are still practical problems delivering relief to where it's most urgently needed. Road transport is slow. Helicopters are the quickest way over treacherous mountain terrain.
We're providing water, food, shelter, housing.
Finally getting through to this remote part of Albania. French helicopters have been bringing in food to the first major camp to be set up in the area.
Of the NATO offensive, which struck at several military targets in Serbia and Kosovo.
On the 13th day of its air campaign and in better weather, NATO says it will now hit hard at the Serbian forces in Kosovo, which are causing so much suffering.
We are now getting our tactics right, making sure that we've got all our forces in there. We have ramped up the number of sorties that we're doing, and we are prosecuting and taking the fight to them very hard. And I think that you will find very direct results coming very shortly.
24 Apache helicopters offered by the Americans will be a significant boost to NATO's firepower, but only from the air. There's no change yet to NATO's vowed policy to keep troops out until they can enter Kosovo in safety. But NATO's own maps admit that the only resistance to the Yugoslav forces is coming from the weakened guerrillas of the Kosovo Liberation Army, squeezed into a western corner of Kosovo. Where they're not out in the open, Yugoslav forces in Kosovo, such as these Third Army units, are well concealed and difficult targets to hit. NATO has shown its ability to destroy fixed military and strategic targets, as these pictures from Serbian television show. But that's quite a different matter from stopping the ethnic cleansing, something that NATO has not even come close to achieving. Jimpy.
To pile on the pressure, RAF Tornadoes joined the Allied offensive last night for the first time. It was the 12th night of airstrikes against the Serbs. Targets hit included Yugoslavia's Air Force headquarters, ammunition stores and oil refineries. 5's Ben Ando has the details.
You will see, towards the end of the clip, 2 bombs coming in from the right-hand side.
This, the sanitized view from the cockpit, and this is what it looks like on the ground in the cold light of day. Another bridge destroyed, another Serb communication link severed. In Belgrade, the blitz goes on. NATO airstrikes producing scenes less like 1999 and more like 1939. These shots show the devastation in a suburb of the Serb capital. Other overnight targets included the headquarters of the Yugoslav Air Force and a military barracks. After days of being plagued by rain, NATO says the good weather now means at last they're managing to strike hard against the Serbs.
We will focus our attention on fielded forces in Kosovo. However, this is no easy task. Nonetheless, we are putting considerable efforts into this critical task, and I expect that these attacks will soon severely disrupt Serbian military and special police operations on the ground.
Those considerable efforts include mighty B-1 bombers returning to RAF Fairford in Gloucester after launching their cruise missiles, and for the first time in this campaign, RAF Tornadoes from Germany. And more hardware is on the way. Another 13 stealth fighters have arrived, and the Americans say they're also ready to send in Apache ground attack helicopters to hit tanks at low level. But it's not all going according to plan. For the 8th day running, RAF Harriers arrived back at base without dropping a single bomb, foiled once again by bad weather. Ben Ando, 5 News.
With no end in sight to the NATO, Jordan has this exclusive report from Albania.
They arrive over the border carrying little or nothing. There's only one unbearable burden, the horrors that force them here. Around the world, we've watched in shock. Imagine then if this was your mother, your brother, and Kosovo was once your home.
This boat that runs from Italy to Albania carries just such people. They have cried from afar and now return to fight for Kosovo.
From around the world, men are coming home to join the KLA, the Kosovan Liberation Army. NATO fights in the air. These recruits want to fight on the ground. Agim and Ned have left wives, children, and comfortable new lives in New York, bringing with them the American slogan, live free or die.
Are you ready to die? I am ready to die. Of course I'm ready to die.
We don't want anybody else to die for us. We're ready to die. But we need arm and support from other Western countries, and I hope they'll do that.
Have you used a gun before?
Yes, I did.
The men from far away who found all this too close to home will join the Red Berets of the KLA, already recruiting young and able refugees. They have a common cause.
I think this is the last opportunity to save Kosovo from Serbs. Fighting, it's the only destination for us.
If you don't fight now?
If I don't fight and the rest of the Albanian people don't fight, I think Kosovo will be lost forever.
While NATO ponders whether to arm the KLA, these men will not wait.
You see all these people here that come in, you have 50% that going straight to the fight.
Where are you going to get the guns?
We have some guns and we're going to have more guns, but I can...
A dim view of the presence of Kosovo Albanians in their country, and they're only allowing a slow trickle to cross the border. Many tents are almost habitable. They just need floors and beds. The German soldiers hope they can help during a difficult Easter.
I hope it'll all be worth it. You've got to appreciate what these people are going through. Then you can forget your homesickness.
It's not so great, but I'm here, and we have to help these people. It's what I signed up for, and that's what I'll do.
These people are exhausted, hungry and traumatized. They fought their way here through hillside mud and have been robbed of their dignity. At last now, they're standing on safe, dry land. But there are still bureaucratic procedures to go through. Macedonian soldiers take down details. The soldiers even run a security check on the meager possessions of the Kosovo Albanian refugees. It's too much for some, and they collapse from sheer exhaustion. Most of the young German soldiers have never witnessed such suffering.
It's enough to make you cry. It's sad to see this kind of thing.
But at least the displaced people are made to feel welcome in the German camp, if not in Macedonia itself. Many are thirsty. Some are so tired, they're even beyond thirst. Here at the German refugee camp, people receive affection and support for the first time since their exodus from Kosovo. For the Krasnicki family, the camp offers temporary respite from the horror of the past weeks. They don't know what the future will bring. After 4 days without food or drink in no man's land, at least they now have a roof over their heads. The soldiers, too, are feeling the pressure. This woman says she's grateful to the German troops, and she's happy that her family can be here. One tent has room for 30 people. There are toilets and showers. A team of army medics checks people's blood pressure and helps those who are tired. And then there's a hot meal, something the refugees have been looking forward to for days, even weeks. The soldiers worked through the night to set up this field kitchen.
What the Macedonian authorities are not able to organize, the German soldiers have done. They established a refugee camp where the refugees from Kosovo regain at least a little dignity. The international help in Macedonia is on its way, but it reaches only a few people who need it. But tens of thousands of refugees from Kosovo still await an uncertain fate in the no man's land, and meanwhile they are starving.
Preparations for another bombing mission out of Britain, designed to bring an end to what's happening on the ground in Kosovo, but part of an air campaign which it's now admitted has, in the short term at least, made the refugees' problems worse.
What has happened?
Cruise missile attacks on Yugoslavia. The pictures were taken from the USS Nicholson in the Adriatic. Sky's David Crabtree at Gioia de Colle has been looking at them.
Each day, more warships arrive in the Adriatic, with their electronic missile systems locked on to targets deep in Serb territory. The vast American Sixth Fleet dominates the show of naval strength. One of America's biggest aircraft carriers, the Theodore Roosevelt, is due to join them, bringing the number of US ships here to 24. On standby are 90 aircraft and almost 15,000 sailors and marines. There's a helicopter-carrying vessel with 2,200 combat-ready marines.
The crew is very sensitive to the situation in Kosovo, and that we maintain situational awareness for them on what's going on with refugees and homes being burned, etc. So they're very focused on doing something to help stop that.
Britain has sent 2 frigates, the Iron Duke and the Somerset, as well as HMS Splendid, the cruise missile-carrying submarine. The build-up of naval power in the Adriatic is continuing at an urgent pace. NATO wants to ensure that there's a relentless bombardment to completely destroy the Serb military infrastructure. There are also Italian, German, Belgian and French ships in the NATO fleet as they continue to turn up the pressure on President Milosevic. David Crabtree, Sky News, in southern Italy.
As the authorities increase their guard on the tens of thousands of refugees who've crossed from Kosovo, the country says it can take no more. In this sprawling camp of more than 65,000 people, there is a growing sense of panic and chaos, not least among the Macedonian security forces, imposing order at times with a stern hand. There's also mounting concern and desperation as the cold and wet conditions here begin to take their toll on a population with little food.
We interrupt that report to bring you pictures from Serbian television. These are pictures of damage, of explosions occurring, we presume, at this moment or very recently in the Novi Sad area of Yugoslavia. This is the city in which NATO strikes have hit several times, a bridge, in fact 2 bridges in that area. Again, those pictures
there really to help in a peacekeeping force. These are British soldiers, these are Italian soldiers, and these vehicles that the Italians have got here, great for peacekeeping operations, not going to be that good for war. And even the tanks here, like the Challenger, this is with King's Royal Hussars, quite frankly, that's very good for peacekeeping as well. But there's only one really good road in from Macedonia. I can't see them doing that. The American cavalry scouts here in their Humvee vehicles, again, peacekeeping. They'd have to do a lot of building up of forces before they put that in. I don't think that the American public in particular are going to want to see ground troops being put in.
Like, just to go back to the multi-launch rocket.
Heading for Kosovo are formidable weapons, of course. 2 battalions of Apaches deployed as a task force called Hawk will try to stop Serbian troops in their tracks and end the ethnic cleansing of Kosovo. What makes the Apache the weapon of choice for this dangerous mission? We continue tonight's in-depth reporting with NBC's Roger O'Neill.
It's a $14 million flying arsenal of tank-killing Hellfire missiles, rockets, even a cannon.
3, 2, 1, fire.
NATO hopes the Apache gives Allied forces a new, big advantage on the Kosovo battlefield. Lieutenant Colonel Shannon Davis commands the 4th Aviation Squadron of 16 Apaches.
These are very lethal systems. They can be used in a wide variety of targets. Just about any type of armor out there now we can defeat with a Hellfire missile.
Over the mountains of Colorado today, 5 Apaches from the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment fly a simulated hasty attack. In real combat, 1 Apache looks down on the battlefield. Pinpoint radar plots enemy positions and distances. Then, almost like a game of hide and seek, relays information to other helicopters that fire missiles without the enemy ever knowing where the attack comes from. The Apache can attack even when the weather is bad. It flies low, treetop height. But the trade-off, a slow attack speed, often only 60 miles an hour, making it vulnerable to even rifle fire on the ground.
Reset, please.
The helicopter flew its first combat missions in Panama, but fired its first shots against an enemy in Iraq. Chief Warrant Officer Bruce Carson flew 12 hair-raising missions in Operation Desert Storm.
The prospects of what may be there and what may not be there, you know, gives you the adrenaline rush, and that goes all the way through till you land.
There's a barrage of information pilots have to decipher when they're flying the Apache. All of it contained in this helmet display unit. All of his flight information, all of his weapons data. 20 to 25 pieces of information in a 1-inch by 1-inch square right in front of his right eye. In addition to that, there's a camera in the front of the aircraft, controlled by the helmet, so when he turns left, the camera turns left. If he turns right, the camera turns right, so that the pilot always sees the battlefield in front of him. The Army says despite its vulnerability, the Apache brings close-in precise firepower and close-up eyes on the battlefield intelligence, where so far the enemy has held the advantage. Roger O'Neill, NBC News, Fort Carson, Colorado.
Mountains bordering Albania, its fighting ability rapidly evaporating.
They don't really have the armaments they need to deal with a sustained armor attack, and that's what they're getting right now.
Pentagon sources say what's left of the rebel forces appears to be fleeing to Albania to try to regroup. All this while the Pentagon says logistical problems such as limited runway capacity at the Tirana, Albania airport may prevent the deployment of troop and tank-killing Apache attack helicopters for a week or so. Too late to slow the evictions or save the last of the Albanian rebels.
I don't think we've ever considered it as a race against time, and as I've tried to outline to you as the days have gone on, that we've had no timeline to follow.
Serb cities on fire. But NATO airstrikes still have not disabled Serb forces on the front lines, who are now in the mopping up phase of their offensive. Bad weather, which on one recent night limited NATO to hitting just 5 targets, is starting to clear. And satellites can see what's happening on the ground in Kosovo. The images are ominous.
Armored personnel carriers and tanks surrounding or appearing to herd groups of people into a smaller area.
With 12 more stealth fighters operating out of a base in Germany and the carrier Roosevelt now on station, clear skies will allow NATO to step up the bombing. But the pilots flying the missions know the end is not in sight.
I continue to tell my folks that this is a 26-mile race. This is not a 100-yard dash.
At best, air power can only stop the final stages of ethnic cleansing.
It's our intention to stop it before the last Kosovo Albanian has been forced to leave and to turn off the lights.
The decision to send Apache tank-killing helicopters will not stop the ethnic cleansing in time. It could take weeks before they're ready to begin operations. Even so, the president made it clear they may yet be needed.
We are prepared to sustain this effort for the long haul. Our plan is to persist until we prevail.
Officials say airstrikes will continue not just until Serb President Milosevic calls off the offensive, but until his forces are out of Kosovo.
Milosevic may...
Camera eye view of a smart bomb or cockpit camera. Tonight you can see and feel it just as the pilots who fly those missions do. Come aboard the mighty 8-engined B-52 bomber and meet the crew. CBS's Cheryl Atkinson takes you along on a dangerous combat mission from takeoff to touchdown from a B-52 base in England.
Who's on headset today?
The men of the 20th Expeditionary Bomb Squadron are anxious to get in the air.
Questions? Let's do it.
B-52s have been flying missions from here at Fairford Royal Air Force Base in England for nearly 2 weeks, but an equal number of sorties have been canceled at the last second without explanation, and the airmen are frustrated. Now, after a final check of the powerful cruise missiles, they'll finally put their training to the test.
Good to go.
These missions to Yugoslavia mark the first time that journalists have been officially allowed to ride along on a B-52 combat sortie. The flight itself is an endurance test, lasting up to 16 hours, no room to stand, no bathroom conveniences. We're in a group of 3 bombers heading towards Serbia. You been on a combat flight before?
No, this is my first one.
In fact, this is the first time in combat for the entire crew.
I'm the actual one that launches the missiles with the weapon control panel here.
2 hours into the mission, the airmen get word that NATO has canceled half their targets, and the lead plane is instructed to return to base.
They've been directed to RTB.
Both remaining planes continue onto the launch site. A jury-rigged music system helps ease the tension.
Not exactly a Bose stereo system, but the best we've got for an almost 40-year-old aircraft.
Now over the Mediterranean, it's time to do the job. A yellow light blinks, and the B-52 shudders and rocks as the missiles drop to their targets below.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Missile away.
It takes only minutes to launch 3 missiles. Then, the long ride home. The crew won't know for another day whether they hit their targets.
Everything went smooth. Everything went as planned.
Hours later, even as the badge of new combat is applied to the planes, the airmen believe they'll see many more missions before this war is ended. Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News, at Fairford Royal Air Force Base.
Has attacked targets in or near at least 5 cities in Serbia, and that at least 10 people were injured in one city. Serb television showed these pictures from the town of Novi Sad. The city lies about 80 kilometers north of Belgrade. During the day, NATO said that clearing weather enabled it to hit what it called a comprehensive number of targets on the previous night. CNN's Brent Sadler reports from Belgrade.
As refugees empty out of Kosovo, ethnic Albanian leader Ibrahim Rugova was shown on Serbian television, appearing tired, talking with Russia's ambassador to Yugoslavia. His future and that of his people hangs in the balance. It looks likely to depend on how long and how far NATO will go in the assault on Yugoslavia. NATO's evolving air raids are striking far and wide. now focusing on attempts to cut supply lines. Serbian television shows damage to a growing list of transport routes and communications, including roads, key bridges over the River Danube, airports in Belgrade and Pristina, as well as fuel depots, making it more difficult, believes NATO, for Yugoslav forces to operate. NATO's strategy may also be aimed at deterring a military move against Montenegro's pro-Western leader, who could be vulnerable during an escalating conflict with the West, a conflict which is inflicting undeniable damage to more and more areas of civilian life.